We are all of us storytellers. We are all weavers of our own fates, co-creating our experience with the environments that we live in and the universe itself, however you choose to understand it. And there are so many conditions that are outside of our control in this world. But and also, like water flowing over stones, we can gently shape the worlds we want to live in. And part of how we can do this is by taking ownership of our own stories. So, hi, I'm Amanda Jane. I am a therapist and consultant for creatives and purpose driven professionals. And in my work with clients, I really love to engage with narrative as both a creative art form, as a form of expression, as well as a therapeutic tool. And I spend I would say an unexpected amount of time thinking about myth and lore and cosmology, especially as they relate to human behavior and spirituality, and things like that, because partly because those are just two areas of fascination for me. And I'll be talking about this more as the weeks go on, but two names that tend to come up often in that intersection, right, of myth, lore, human behavior, storytelling, all of the things, are Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. Now, I am definitely influenced by and have an affinity for Jung's work. But and also, one of my favorite phrases, but and also, and this might just be my own, like, whatever, like hang up issue, whatever. But I seem to have like a moral aversion to putting any one person on a pedestal, or one person's work on a pedestal, and especially because like in the context of both Jung and Campbell, their work was influential, but it was not original, right? Both of them really and this isn't to minimize it necessarily, and at the same time it's meant to sort of temper it, like a little bit, like put things into context, because both of them basically created a way of synthesizing teachings, and beliefs and practices from several cultures for a predominantly Western male audience at a particular time in history. And I think with Jung's work, what I appreciate about it is, he gave more credence to lived experience and to different ways of knowing than just the scientific method itself, which I think is very, especially in the context of human behavior and understanding humans and social dynamics and interpersonal dynamics and inner world dynamics, that's really important. Science is really slow, and the law of averages is great for policy, but it doesn't really help an individual who, regardless of what the average says or what the general consensus is still an anomaly or an outlier or has a different experience, So give Jung the props for that. And in giving us language in English that we can use to sort of engage with and articulate with some really complex topics and concepts. And so again, this is my criticism, things like that, for them in particular. And I bring, especially in the context of the value of lived experience, right? This is the value of your story, right? So maybe you're not an outlier or an anomaly, right? Maybe you don't feel like you're particularly special or unique in any way, but your story is still unique to you, right? Nobody has lived your life except for you. And so your story still offers information and insight that can only be found through the lens of your experience, right? So learning how to, or finding ways to connect with yourself and connect with the stories that you have to tell, and the stories that you want to create and put forward. That matters. That matters, and it's important, and it's worthy, right? Um, and so when we're thinking about this, there's different forms, narrative forms that we can work with. There's different sort of tools and devices that we can use. And, Jung talks about archetypes, and Joseph Campbell, who was inspired by Jung, also talks about archetypes, and he came up with, I don't know if he is most known for sort of synthesizing certain types of myths across cultures into what's called the hero's journey, or a monomyth, and it, like, the hero's journey itself does do a good job of capturing the spirit of transformative experiences. And our lives are much more than that, and there's multiple ways that we can experience that. So, we'll get into it, because we're going to get into it because in the next few weeks, I'm going to be diving into archetypes and narrative forms, with the goal of viewing them through a prism, so to speak, right? To apply a lens where we can kind of look at some of these tools and devices through different lenses, so that you can engage with them as tools, as mechanisms, as a threshold or gateway to engage with your own story and start playing with this concept in your own life. And I will be offering examples. So, like, I'll have some, I don't want these videos to be too dense with information. And so I'm going to rely on you, my dear viewers, for feedback into areas that you want more information on, and areas that maybe you don't need as much information on, or whatever. I'm trying to sort of to be as bare bones as possible on some of these concepts, because I could talk forever and ever. So I don't want to overwhelm anybody. I don't want to contribute to information overload, because I really want the focus to be on application and play and exploration with it. And in that vein, I will be sharing some of my own work, art things, the things that I do to play with this and to play with expression. And I'm going to be really transparent with you all. That's a vulnerable thing. That's not, it's a little outside of my comfort zone to share in this way, but it's something I'm feeling called to do. So we're just going to go, again, we're rolling with it. I'm an intuitively guided person at this point, and so when my intuition says, "Hey, Amanda, maybe try this. Maybe just, I don't know, do this and see what it feels like. Just try it." It's not, my intuition is not like super peer pressure-y. It's not like the just say no kind of friend. But it is a friend I'm still learning how to trust. So we're trusting them. And so you'll see some examples as we go forward. But, as we are going through this, I'm going to start probably with the hero's journey, just as like a framework, because it's familiar too. Like, it's something that's really familiar. There's so many examples of it. And also, like in the hero's journey, there are specific archetypes, right? There's the hero themselves. There's, there's the ally, there's the mentor, there's, the sage or the wise person, there's the villain, there's the, the tempter or the temptress, or however you want to put it. And so there's all of these different characters and tropes and archetypes. And also, that can be really helpful. That can be really helpful for understanding things, but it's also really reductive, right? And this is the criticism of Campbell among folklorists and people who study folklore and mythology for a living, which I am not one of them. So, again, my exposure to it comes mostly from like creative expression, right? It's not about historical accuracy or like deep anthropological analysis necessarily, but I want to give honor and credence to that. And even, like looking at Greco-Roman mythology, for example, right? Which is something that I'm pretty sure Campbell pulled from in many different ways, but there are stories in which Zeus or Hera or Artemis or whoever, like insert any god, are the benefactors or quote unquote the good guys, right? But there are just as many stories where they commit acts and deeds that we would consider immoral or evil or downright petty, vengeful. And so, like, each of these gods are still the gods. They're still their role, what they are the gods of doesn't change necessarily. Like, their syncretism is a whole other thing that we'll talk about. We'll talk about. But like, generally speaking, if you're sticking to one of the pantheons, their role doesn't necessarily change much, or deviate much from the sort of core things that they are the god of. But yet in these different stories, it begs, like, are they a good god? Are they a bad god? Can we trust them? Can we not? Which archetype are they really? And the answer is always going to be, it depends. It depends on who's telling the story. It depends on what story we're talking about, right? And it depends on who you resonate with in the story, So it all points to this concept that I think is really important for us to remember, which is that none of us is just any one thing. We contain each and every archetype within us, right? We all contain multitudes. And this is one of my favorite TED Talks ever, is from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who talks about more than a single story. And essentially, like, this idea that whether we're talking about an archetype or a stereotype or a particular character, it's not that any of those things are untrue or that there's no truth to them. It's that it is an incomplete truth, right? It is only one facet. It is only one edge of the prism, so to speak. So when we are looking at stories, when we are engaging with stories, when we are engaging with ourselves and the stories that we're trying to tell, it's important to factor in all of these different parts of ourselves, all of these different perspectives and these different lenses, and finding a way to engage with them and play with them that feels safe and meaningful. And in my world, transformation is it's constant, right? So it's transformative, but it doesn't have to be a full-on ego death transformation all the time. It's just gaining new perspective, gaining fresh insight on something by finding ways to engage with these different parts or these different archetypes or characters that we have within ourselves that have something to teach us, right? That have something to express or to share with us, right? So, whether you're using Jungian analysis, like psychoanalysis, if you're using internal family systems or parts work, or if you follow a spiritual tradition that emphasizes integration and aligning these, like, whether it's dualities or multiple aspects of ourselves, this is something that holds true for you, right? It's not new to you. It's not something that you haven't been doing. Your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to take ownership of your voice in this process, right? So what are the stories that you want to tell? Which ones do you want to explore more or develop further, right? What are some stories that maybe feel unfinished or that maybe feel like it's just a rough outline or it's just like it's just conceptual at this point, but maybe it's something worth fleshing out further. And what are the worlds that you want to create for yourself and those around you, right? I think in applying this to real life, there may be like whatever our ideal or fantasy world is for ourselves. Maybe we just want the fantasy, right? Maybe it's just a form of escape or coping with reality. Maybe it is something that we want to create, and maybe the reality is that's we might not see that world as we wish to experience it in this lifetime. And so that's okay. Like let's accept that. And it doesn't mean it's not worth exploring, because as you explore it, one, there might be elements that you can experience in this lifetime, and there are seeds that you can plant for the future, right? You can give it a chance to sprout. And if you believe in reincarnation, maybe you get to be reincarnated into a life where the seeds that you planted in this one, you get to enjoy the fruits of that in another one. And if you don't believe in reincarnation, then maybe it's just about legacy and planting the seeds for a world that you wish to exist within and hope that others can enjoy, even if you can't, So there's all of these ways that we can play with it, and there's all of these ways to think about it, not as, an exercise in futility, or not as a way of creating a contrast that leads to disappointment or despair or disillusionment. It's a way of exploring despair and disillusionment and disappointment. It's a way of confronting some of those feelings or confronting what it is that has us feeling that way, and finding, working through these different lenses, these different facets of the prism, to find the viewpoints and the insights and the perspectives that are going to feel most nourishing to us, right? That are going to feel most enriching to how we want to live, to how we want to experience our lives and our world and ourselves, and how we want to share that with others, So basically, we're going to be engaging with these types of questions through creative expression. And, my medium tends to be words, and the, predominantly, but that can also be paint. It can be moving your body, dance, martial art, for example, or whatever, photography style, etc. Right? So we're going to be exploring both this aspect of catharsis and release, and a way of engaging with perhaps uncomfortable or difficult aspects of ourselves or feelings or things that we are still trying to process or, need a way of engaging with, that feels off, like that, frankly, that can feel fun and playful, or at least, like we have some sort of agency or control in it. We have a say in how we experience it and what we do with it. But it can also be a way of forming new relationships with ourselves and with others through this play, through this expression, through sharing what we create. So, I think one thing I want to emphasize too, and this might just be, my way of setting low expectations for the things that I'm going to share on this channel, in terms of my own artwork. But, I want us to consider that at the end of the day, when we're looking at this through art, right? Not just the therapeutic experience of self-expression and finding ways of releasing, processing, and experiencing a feeling or a difficult history or story. But But by creating art, like when we're thinking about creating art, it's not about consumerism or being quote unquote good enough to get paid for it, right? It is about self-expression. It is about telling your story, and it's about witnessing, right? It's about letting others witness you, and it's about showing others that you have witnessed them, right? It's about sharing what you have witnessed. And anything beyond that is a bonus, right? Some of us do have a calling to live by our artistry, and that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. And on some level, perhaps all of us do, if we open up the concept of artistry to just to the, like, I made a TikTok the other day of like, you know, our existence is like each, our individual existence is a poem unto itself, right? Just being here, like living your life can be a poem, right? There is so much beauty and inspiration and expression that can be found in the most mundane things. So whatever you do for a living can still be an art. It doesn't, and again, it doesn't have to be, right? Right? Sometimes, like, it's, what I'm trying to say is the art is in the expression. The art is in the choices you make and how you are telling your story. The art is in the story itself. And the art is in the process of discovering what the stories are that you want to tell, right? Everything else that comes after that, everything else that's related to, you know, living in this modern world of ours is extra, you know? The art is about frankly what I think what matters, and it's about play, and it's about tapping into this deeper meaningful relationship with ourselves, with the world around us, with the people around us, and with the universe, and a way of making meaning with our place in it, whatever that means to you, right? So anyway, the point is, it's not about what you do to survive, it's about what you do to live, right? And play, and we're gonna play with it, you know. We're gonna get a little critical of things, but in a playful way. We're gonna have fun with it. And yeah, so anyway, so if that resonates with you, if this journey is something that you feel called to or are already on, then, you know, I hope to see you soon, and we can, you know, hang out and explore and adventure together. So with all that being said, I will see you when I see you.